Okay, this is the confidentiality session for the unit Work Legally and Ethically. It's a pretty crucial area for us to get this straight and get this right. You'll find it repeated, and I'll apologise now, you'll find it repeated throughout the course. It is important. We're going to look at all of the areas here, and you're going to need to put that into practice. For example, when you're learning about group work, you'll need to recall some of this stuff and put it into a group work context, or later units when we're doing role plays, you'll need to remember this. So crucial, and you're going to hear it repeated throughout your course. That's okay. Get used to it. You'll be right. Repetition is a useful thing sometimes. But I actually wanted to begin with putting you in the place of a youth worker or somebody working with young people. It's probably going to happen. There's 50 of you in the class at the moment. It's probably going to happen to half of you within the next 5 years. There'll be a time when you've built trust with somebody, a young person who you suspect is suffering from some abuse of some sort or something not good is happening. And they will trust you. And they'll say, I've got a secret. I've never told anybody about it. And if I tell you, would you promise not to tell anybody else? Yeah, I know. And that's right. It's a bit of a heartbreaker one, because your gut instinct will be to say, yes, no worries. I'm here. You can tell me anything at all. By the end of today's session, I'm hoping that you'll have realised that would be a really dumb mistake, and you will have practiced what you will say, because it's something that's really hard to think up on the spot. So yeah, we'll rehearse that a little. Because I do think it would be a dumb statement. Has anybody got any thoughts on why it might be? Yep, up the back. So yes, so if they're going to as I said, you've got suspicions of abuse. If they're going to disclose something, and you've said, you trust me so much, I've always been honest with you, yes, I will keep your secret. How's your trust going to be if you then turn around and say, oh, hang on, I can't keep that secret? Yeah, okay. Or alternatively, you do keep it secret. How's that going to work? You're discovering about somebody's abused background. It's a legal requirement we'll talk about later, but it's a legal requirement. I think most of you knew to report that. Or even if it wasn't, let's pretend there's no mandatory reporting. Let's take a look at that in terms of, okay, you've been told about this person being abused. What are you going to do about it without telling anybody else if you're going to retain that trust? Yes. So that's the difficult situation. You're not Steven Seagal. You're not going to go around there with the baseball bat. It wouldn't help anyway. That only helps in the movies. Let's move on. That's the situation that we need to be prepared for. That's what could well happen to us. That's, as I'm saying, I think will happen to half the people here before their next 5 years is up. So we're going to explore the whole area of confidentiality, what you can keep confidential, what you can't, because we want our clients to be able to trust us. We're going to be looking at from those three overlapping areas of the legal requirements, the ethical requirements, and your organisation's policy requirements. I'm going to start with the chat about ethical space. Let's take a look at a scenario. Let's say there's Yasmin, the youth worker. She works at the local youth centre. I understand a lot of my examples are youth focused. There's a reason for that. We'll get to that in a moment. She lives with Corey, who's a member of the police force in the same town. So we've got Yasmin, the youth worker, Corey, the cop. You're following me so far? Excellent. One day they're having a chat. Yasmin, the youth worker, mentions that Sarah, one of her clients, has started dealing drugs so that, because she was faced with this issue of dealing drugs or doing sex work, she's chosen the drugs because that was her preference. The sort of things that a youth worker and a cop would chat about if they happened to live together. Later on, Sarah, the sex worker, is later questioned by the police, and she accuses Yasmin of telling the police about it. And Yasmin, in fact, admits that and says, Well, there's no law against talking to the police, which is true, just to clarify. And Yasmin, the youth worker, says it was for the good of the community after all because there was a bit of a drug problem at the time. Okay, so you've got the story clear because I'm about to shift it off. Taking a look at that, I want you to form a line with the people over that side saying, I don't agree with this statement, and over this side saying, yes, I do. Here's the statements. I think Yasmin, the youth worker, was behaving fairly in this situation. I'll give you a few different scenarios. We're going to, for the recording's sake, I'll actually go through the scenarios and then we'll talk through our responses. So, I believe she was behaving fairly. Scale yourself on 1 to 10. We'll explore some of the issues there. I think youth workers in general, or community service workers in our case, should always keep confidential all things that the young people want us to, or our clients in general. That's their right after all. Always keep it confidential. Again, we'll be scoring yourself, ranking yourself from 1 to 10. I think it's important to reveal confidential information about a young person or a client of other sorts if it's needed by the client's family. I'll stick with young people on this one. Confidential information about a young person, so I'm talking there about a 12 to 18-year-old. Keep it confidential if it's needed by that young person's family. It's important to do that. Agree, disagree. I think it's important to reveal confidential information about a young person if there's other community organisations that want it. Agree, disagree. We'll discuss that in a moment. I think it's okay to break confidentiality if it's in your service's policy to do so. Okay, so I won't get you to get up. There's just too many of you here. Scale yourself on 1 to 10, but be honest on that because I'm going to actually ask you to share your responses and we'll have a bit of a yarn about who scored themselves where. So write down your answers to the 5 questions there. I'll give you a bit of time and we'll have a bit of a chat about each one. Okay, so that was interesting. We've got a diversity of opinions here. This is why, do you remember early sessions I talked about how our own personal morals and our own personal beliefs are different to the code of ethics? Although they both seem to be about the same thing, doing the right thing, doing what's the difference between right and wrong and good and bad, there's a difference showing up there. And you'll notice that in all of that discussion, I wasn't saying definitively, those of you who scored up this end, at the one end, were saying you're right and you're wrong. You've got your own personal values, you've got your own personal opinions, as did Yasmin, as did Corey the cop and Sarah the sex worker. An interesting discussion there about how much parents should be involved, how much parents should have the right to, at what age young people should be independent. I could see a clear distinction there between youth workers and the non-youth work students. Just thinking about who was marking themselves in different places there. Youth workers have a very strong emphasis on empowerment and treating young people as players in their own life, as being able to make decisions. So I just thought that was interesting. But okay, so we can see that. So therefore, we've got the codes of ethics that help us decide collectively as an industry, here's the common response we're going to have. So that our little cross-legged client earlier on, or so that Sarah, the client in this story, know what they can expect from workers, and we know how to pull each other into line when we're acting unethically. Let's take a little look at that. The ACWA Code of Ethics, this is the Community Service Workers, or the Community Workers Code in general for Australia. It specifically says we're going to keep all information about clients that they tell us about in the course of their practice as confidential. So if you happen to know the client outside of work, the code of ethics is it doesn't mention what to do with that. It's specifically talking about information you find out about clients in the course of practice, kept confidential, except where, if you've got their permission, you're going to make referrals. So they use a lot of words, but so with the client's permission, referrals are to be made and other professional consultation is sought. So where you've got the client's permission, then you can share the information. Or alternatively, where not disclosing the information would breach the terms of your employment. And a crucial part of that is those exceptions need to be notified to the client. You need to tell the client what the exceptions are. So they've thrown things back onto the agency policy because it will vary from one organisation to the next within the law. So that's the AQUA one. You'll notice that the Fairbridge Code, this is the Youth Workers Code. There's slight variations between the states, but it's basically the Youth Workers Code throughout Australia. It says that the information provided by the young people won't be used against them, which is interesting. That's a bit more than the AQUA Code. It won't be used against them, nor will it be shared with other people who might use it against them. They should be made aware of the contextual limits to confidentiality and their permission is sought for disclosure. So again, same concept, different words. They're saying you need to get permission before you share, and you should make sure they know what the limits are. They say the contextual limits. It changes from one context to another. But until that happens, everything is presumed to be confidential. Yeah, good question. So contextual limits are, a few years ago there was a woman who was working, she was doing research on the kids who were, the turbo kids they were called, the kids who were stealing high-priced cars, hooning them, racing. They actually were getting off, they were enjoying the police chase. And she had to research these young people. So she chose to research these young people, find out about what they were up to, find out what made them tick and what made them think. She kept a lot more things confidential because she had to do that as part of her job. So she was aware of some major, we're talking Porsches and we're talking cars worth a couple $100,000 being stolen, in some cases for profit. That was part of her work. That's an extreme example at one end of keeping things confidential. An extreme example on the other end is when PCYCs first was set up. Does anybody know what PCYC stands for? Yeah, Police Citizens Youth Club. So it used to be the Police Boys Club. It was set up by cops working in their own time after hours, saying rather than arresting kids the whole time, we would like to help them. So let's hang out with them, let them know we're not the enemy, play basketball with them and do helpful things like teach them to box or teach them martial arts and other ways of beating each other up. Police boys clubs I had an issue with, can you tell? Yeah, okay. Because it was all about martial arts. It was all about, anyway. They said because all of us workers are actually police, you can't tell us anything illegal. It's the same as talking to a cop. And when they later went on to employ youth workers and welfare workers, some of them took that same attitude. Every worker, how could you possibly keep things that are illegal confidential? So I've got two extremes I've given there. Usually as welfare workers, we're somewhere in the middle that says we know about illegal activity and some of them will keep confidential. But the context is going to be different depending on whether you're working alongside police or whether you're researching turbo kids. That's what I mean by, does that make sense? The contextual limit. It varies from one place to another. Okay. So yeah, emphasising in both of them that they need to be made aware of the limits to confidentiality. So that's why I've got you thinking about how you're going to explain that to clients as one of your assessment tasks. So we've looked at all these areas. So I've touched on one area. We're going to now move on to the legal area. And you'll remember me saying early on, sorry, policies come last. So we've already looked at ethics. We're now looking at the law. You remember me saying the law has boundaries. The law says there's things you have to do, there's things you can't do. And there's a whole bunch of things that the law hasn't really dictated to us one way or the other. The law's given us some freedom. The code of ethics might not, and your agency policy might not. We're just looking at, in this next phase, things from within the law. So just the legal boundaries. With that I gave you earlier, what I'm going to get you to do is, if you've got highlighters, traditionally I used to do this. I had infinite resources and I could give you each a red highlighter, a yellow or an orange one, and a green one, just like traffic lights. You got it. I don't have infinite resources. Take your hand out. You'll notice in the right column of left little boxes, basically I want you to mark. Read the form for yourself, read the details. It's a basic comprehension test. I want you to, in the boxes, to either say this is something that you cannot do, so that's right, not in the box. Say must do, because the law says you must do some of the things on that list, and may do. So must, may, mustn't, must not. Put that in the boxes there, label them. I'm going to give you a little bit of time to think that through. Feel free to put a whopping great big question mark next to those that you don't really understand. But basically I'm wanting you to read it, comprehend it for yourself, and we'll go through that form, this form that's on the board there, in a little while. Take some time to look at it. Yeah, put it, you don't have to have a dirty great big question mark. You can put a very lightweight penciled in one. If you're not understanding it, I will explain each individually.